Good morning again, everyone.
Morning.
It's a privilege for me to be able to introduce a good friend and brother to all of you. Dr. Michael Mescon is here to speak to us. I met Dr. Mescon first in 1985 at the Grand Chapter Congress in Dallas, Texas. At the time, I was a chapter consultant working for Delta Sigma Pi, and it was my privilege to meet him at the airport in the hotel's limousine, my first limousine ride. And I was able to escort him back to the Congress where he was the keynote speaker at that time. Dr. Mescon has spoken to numerous Delta Sig groups, including Grand Chapter Congresses, regional, provincial meetings, and we're honored to have him here with us again today. Brother Mescon is the Dean Emeritus of Georgia State University's College of Business, where he was the first holder of the Ramsey Chair of Private Enterprise, which was the first endowed private enterprise chair in the world. He's established over 200 chairs of private enterprise globally. He has received numerous awards, including the Entrepreneur of the Year Award from Ernst & Young, Venture Magazine, the Georgia Veteran Small Business Advocate of the Year Award, and the National Award of Excellence, which has been awarded to him twice by the U.S. Small Business Administration. He has published numerous articles and books. He is a contributing editor for Delta Airlines Sky magazine and the Atlanta Business Chronicle. He's also co-authored an audio tape series for Nightingale Conant entitled Management Excellence and Leadership. He's active in our local community in many different ways. He has served Delta Sig in many different ways. He was honored in 2001 as our Delta Sigma Pi Career Achievement Award winner, and most recently has served Delta Sigma Pi as a trustee for the Leadership Foundation and is now an honorary trustee. I invite Dr. Michael Mescon to come and join me and speak to you. Thanks.
Let me first of all thank you for altering your schedule. This reminded me of a discussion I had yesterday with a friend of mine who was about my age. He said, Mike, he said, you know, there's one good thing about getting old. I asked, what is it? He said, I forgot. I'm here a day early, and I thank you for the adjustment. I actually started my collegiate teaching career at Georgia State University when I was 24 years old. I had just completed a few years as an enlisted person in the military. I had a PhD in hand from New York University, and I knew absolutely nothing at all. And I recall at that time being asked to address a group of CEOs, a group of company presidents, for one reason. The previously scheduled speaker had become ill. Well, I made my presentation, and right afterwards, one of the group came up. And he said, Dr. Mescon, he said, I really liked what you had to say. Well, of course, I really liked what he had to say. I especially appreciated the comments because they were coming from Dick Rich, Richard H. Rich, who at that time, he was a president, he was the CEO of Rich's, truly one of the great department stores in the world, but long before Rich's became part of the Campo, then of the Federated Group. Mr. Rich asked, do you teach management? I said, yes, sir. He said, have you ever managed? I said, no, sir. He said, doesn't that bother you? I said, not one bit. I said, it's all inside work, no heavy lifting. I said, this, Mr. Rich, this is a terrific job. He said, let me tell you something. He said, you are a child, you are an infant. I recall his referring to me as an infant. He said, no matter how smart, no matter how glib, no matter how articulate you are, you better determine if you can close that gulf between mouth and movement. Because if you can't, psychologically at least, you will always have a credibility problem. He said, now you come with me. I am going to make a great merchant, a great mentor, a great leader out of you. I said, Mr. Rich, I said, I appreciate that. But I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. I watched my mother and my father, who were merchants. Now, they weren't great merchants like you, but they were good merchants. I watched them get up early every single morning. They went to work together. They stayed late every evening. Now, I was never fully certain what I wanted to do, but that wasn't it. They worked too hard. He said, no, mine. He says, you come with me. I'm going to show you what a real leadership, a real mentoring education is all about. Well, happily, I went. And it was one of the finest postdoctoral programs a 24-year-old know-nothing could receive. And I helped run Rich's old Stewart Avenue warehouse. I managed their wrapping and packing and delivery operation. But what I really learned was the magic, was the excitement, was the electricity that can be generated by one individual in a power position, one leader, one role model, one mentor, one of you who is truly there. Come back, if you will, please, to a Christmas Eve many years ago. It was suggested I use the phrase many years ago instead of giving the date. Someone said you give the date, the audience wonders, my God, will he be able to complete the presentation? It was 10 p.m. The store officially was closed for 30 minutes. Emotionally and physically, we were devastated. We were wasted because since Thanksgiving, that incidentally is when the Christmas season began in retailing. Thanksgiving, today, as you know, it begins July 5th. But since Thanksgiving, routinely, we had been working 7 days a week, 14, 16, and on occasion, 20-hour days. For one, I had enough. I wanted to go home. But at 10 in the evening, I looked up, and there was a great man himself, my mentor, my hero, my role model, the CEO, the boss. There was Dick Rich. Now, no one in here knew Mr. Rich. It's a shame. Tell me, have you ever known anyone, a woman or a man, who no matter what time of day, no matter what the circumstances, have you ever known anyone who always appears as if she or he just stepped out of a fashion magazine? Dick Rich did not perspire. He was always absolutely elegant. He was perfect. But at 10 in the evening, I looked up. There he was, out on the sales floor, carrying a very large package out to a customer's car. Two messages. Number one, no one had to tell me who the boss was. Boss, incidentally, was not Dick Rich. The boss was the stakeholder, the customer. Number two, no one had to explain to me what I was supposed to do when I came to work each morning. Simply stated, morally and ethically, what I was supposed to do was whatever it was that had to be done. Now, you build an organization with that kind of culture, with that sort of ethos, I will show you an endeavor that can compete effectively, properly, ethically, and profitably with anyone, with absolutely anyone, anywhere in the world. I made this observation not too long ago to a group of students. And one asked, well now, Dr. Mescon, if that's your feeling, if that's your belief, tell us, how do you think we ought to do business with others? And here's what I've always suggested to all of my students. Here's what I recommend to you. That you handle every single transaction. I don't care about the nature of it or the size of it. But you handle every transaction with each person. I don't care who that person is. that really doesn't matter. But you handle every transaction with each person as if you had to live with that person in a very small room for the rest of your life. Chances are that person's going to be pleased. You're going to make a profit. You're going to make money. You will also add that person to your sales force at no additional cost to you. You know, that concept is sound, it is basic, it is valid. In all candor, however, I cannot claim credit for its origin. Just among us, one brother to another, in the intimacy of this room, if you write about leadership, and if you talk about mentoring, and if you have a sense of history, now you need a sense of history. Coming up with anything new or novel is virtually impossible. You know, the first time I heard that concept expressed, the principle expressed about a small room, was a meeting of a large financial holding company once again, many years ago, and the real star of the meeting was a person I had heard about all of my life, but I never met him. The man's name was Arthur Morris. Let me tell you about Arthur Morris. My parents loved Arthur Morris. They didn't know Arthur Morris either, but they loved Arthur Morris. They would describe Arthur Morris as the great visionary banker from Virginia. You see, it was Arthur Morris who, during a terrible period in this great nation of ours, during the Depression, it was Arthur Morris, the visionary, who said, you know, I believe a legitimate function of a commercial bank should be to loan money to people whose only collateral in many instances is good character. And the only collateral my parents ever had in all too many instances was an abundance of good character. And here I had an opportunity to be with the great man himself, who at that particular time chronologically was up in years, probably in his middle or late 80s, yet he was still the head of a huge financial empire. And Mr. Morris got up before a room full of leaders, people like yourself, you're leaders, group full of CEOs, each a president of a bank. And he said, this has not been a particularly good year. He said, our business is becoming more intricate, more complex, more competitive, and especially more global. You ready for the date? 1963. He said, if we are to succeed, we better determine right now that we can no longer afford the luxury, he called it the luxury. We can no longer afford the luxury of a single satisfied customer. And the minute he said that, the man sitting next to me, CEO of a bank in Knoxville, Tennessee, his observation, Mr. Morris is getting senile. No more satisfied customers. What is he talking about? Let me assure you, there was nothing at all wrong with Mr. Morris. Mr. Morris said, if we are to succeed, if we are to be the best, if we are to compete globally, we better determine right now that the only type of customer we want is one who is pleased. And then I heard it. He said, you please me as a customer, you're going to make money, you will add me to your sales force at no additional cost to you. Now I'm sure you recognize, because you're smart, that this is easier said than done. Let's take a look at some of the changes I've noted over the years. You know, when I first started teaching at the collegiate level, I'd walk into a college classroom. Almost 80% of my students were male. 95% of my students expected to go to work for a given organization and remain there for 25, 30, or 40 years and then retire with a stereotypical gold watch. Today I walk into that same classroom, and in many instances, well over 70% of my students are women, And very few expect to remain with any organization for more than a few years. Do you know why? Look around. You've seen mothers and fathers and friends and associates downsized, right-sized, re-engineered out of jobs. And by the way, take a look at the organizations that have gone through this process. And in all too many instances, what they're doing after is precisely what got them into trouble before, except with fewer people. So what's going on right now is the corporate equivalent of taking steroids. Short-term gain. Long-term, we are already beginning to pay one horrendous price in terms of loyalty, in terms of dedication, in terms of commitment. Now, what are some of the other changes? Well, everything today is global. Everything today. It's no longer a matter of choice. You know, at one time you heard a professor tell you, well, we want a strong country, buy American. I don't even know what this is. I have no idea what it means to buy American. The BMW I saw parked outside was manufactured in Greer, South Carolina. I can assure you, if you had to take every piece of clothing that you're wearing right now that was made in a foreign country and place it right here in front of me, this might not be a pretty scene. But everything today is global. You want to know where your competition is coming from? I'll tell you where it's coming from. It's coming from India, it's coming from China, it's coming from Africa, it's coming from Europe. You've got to be able to compete with the biggest and the best anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. Now, having said that, what type of leadership does it take? I should indicate that there is, and I better indicate this because it's so important, it's so critical. One other change. I noticed during the 1990s, many of my students, particularly at the MBA level, we'd break out into groups and we'd analyze cases, but many of these students indicated to me that they felt the real sin. From a behavioral perspective, the real sin was not committing the deed, but the real sin was being what? Stupid enough to get caught. Now you tell me, how are you going to build an organization that's competitive, that is ethical, with that type of mentality? What type of leadership does it take? And I thought about this, and I recalled a presentation I'd made several years ago in San Diego to Bank of America. This was before all the mergers and acquisitions, and Bank of America had just had a terrific year, and they were celebrating. And I was addressing about 1,200 of their offices, and midway through my presentation, one of the participants stopped me and he said, Dr. Mescon, he said, do you know what we need at Bank of America today more than ever before? I asked, no, what do you need at Bank of America today more than ever before? I couldn't imagine. After all, they just had a stellar year, just won the equivalent of the World Series, the championship. Well, I didn't know, but he did. He said, you know what we need, what we truly need, is one more Giannini. Now, Giannini, as some of you may know, he was the founder of the Bank of Italy, which later became the Bank of America. I asked, well, why do you need one more Giannini? He said, when Giannini was here, you knew it. If you did a good job, he told you. If you didn't, he let you know. Giannini, he said, was visible, he was accessible. Giannini was capable of relating to other human beings face to face, person to person. Giannini was able to communicate, I know, I understand, I care. And you know, having worked with hundreds of organizations worldwide of all kinds, big, little, public, private, profit, not-for-profit, I have come to the conclusion that if there is a shortage of anything, particularly a dearth on a supply side, it is a shortage of individuals. Individuals who are leaders, who are mentors, but people who are visible, who are accessible, who are capable of relating to others face to face, person to person, who are able to communicate, I know, I understand, I am concerned, and I care. And you know the real tragedy, but of course you know this. The real tragedy is that the time has never been better than it is right now for each of us to turn everything around. You know, I still teach, I still work with young people every single day. And let me assure you, when these students come to class, what they're looking for, what they're asking for, what they're begging for is what Ullman's an old-time writer in the area of management, is what Ullman referred to as skyhooks, cultural reference points, something to hang on to, something to believe in. But you know what they want to hang on to? We all want to hang on to this. Not so much statements of philosophy. Incidentally, this country today is awash in statements of philosophy and commitment. You know what people are looking for? Are statements of behavior. And what an opportunity we have right now to be somebody else's Dick Rich, to be somebody else's Arthur Morris, to be somebody else's Giannini, to generate by virtue of our own behavior, and that's what it's going to take, to generate by virtue of our own behavior that sort of legitimate before-the-fact empowerment, so that when people come to work each day, what they're going to do, because we do it, what they're going to do is whatever it is that has to be done. You know, I'm just talking about basics. I hope at this particular juncture you're saying, I know everything he said. I hope so. Talk about basics. I've always talked about basics. One of my favorite stories, several years ago, one of my students came to me. And he said, Dr. Mescon, he said, I am ready to graduate. I want to be successful. Tell me, what do I have to do? I said, are you absolutely certain you want to be successful? He said, 9 years of paying tuition, it has made success for me my own personal holy grail. I want your advice. I asked, are you ready? He said, I am ready. I said, all right. If you really want to be successful, if you truly want to be successful, my advice, show up. He said, that's it? He says, I've been giving you money for almost a decade. You're telling me if I really want to be successful, all I have to do is show up? I said, only 70% of the time. Now, if you want to increase your odds, my advice, show up on time. Now then, if you want to devastate, if you want to destroy competition, show up on time, dress to play. And when I use the term dress to play, I'm talking psychologically, mentally dress to play. I said, chances are, you won't even have to break a sweat. You see, the fact of the matter is, in a nation that has to compete competitively today, too many people, they satisfice, they just get by because they don't have the commitment, the desire, the passion to do what every single one of us knows must be done. Let me just share with you a few more observations about some of my students. I love my students. For many years, I taught a principles of management class at 7 in the morning. Once again, let's talk about basics. 7 in the morning. I had 206 students in my class. Generally, every quarter, we were on a quarter system then, every seat was filled. You know why? I'm really good. And here's what I tell them the very first day of class. Okay? Now remember the average age of my student at that time, the demographics, the average age of my student was 27. 85% worked either full or part-time. As a matter of fact, when I first came to Georgia State, 90% of the students were older than I was. 95% were smarter than I was. So here we're not dealing with a group of neophytes. These people are working. And I'd indicate to them, and I'm indicating to you, this class begins at 7 a.m. You cannot come in at 7:01 a.m. The plane has departed. The train gone from the station. Well, they've never heard this. Many of you have never heard this. Well, you've heard it because you do show up on time. And then the hands would be raised. Well, now, Dr. Mescon, I commute every day from, let's say, from Duluth, a suburb. And he said, there's heavy traffic. Well, of course, there's heavy traffic every day here. I said, you better leave an hour ahead of time. And for those of you who are attending this class, from London or Tokyo, you better leave maybe 3 or 4 days ahead of time. But nobody comes in after 7 a.m. By the way, one basic characteristic of leaders, when you come up with something like this, you always have to explain the why. And here's the why of it. You're studying management, you're studying leadership, hence don't ever expect anybody else to do what you won't or you can. Every once in a while I'd get a call from a parent. See, I also had 17 and 18-year-old kids in my class. And here was a conversation. Invariably, this was a conversation. Just Dr. Mescon speaking. Are you the one with a bizarre, on-time policy? I said, I don't know if it's bizarre, but that's my policy. And the mother or the father would say, you can't do that. I pay your salary. I said, oh, it's you. I've been looking for you. It's not enough. And then I'd ask, do you want your daughter or your son to be a failure? Well, I can tell you right now, with 3 kids and 7 grandkids, you don't want your kids to be failures. If for no other reason, you want them out of the house. Change the locks as soon as they leave. And I'd say, I'm going to make a deal with your child. If your child comes to my class on time, mentally dressed to play, prepared, I'm going to do everything possible to make absolutely certain that she or he can compete anywhere in the world. End of the discussion. Never had any trouble at all. And that's my feeling when I'm a teacher, when I'm a professor, when I walk in here. I don't want you to fail. I don't want you to fail. I'm going to do everything possible. We'll do it together to make sure what? That when you leave this class, when you leave this session, you leave with what? With something of worth. That's going to make you a better person. Let me just share with you a couple of illustrations about some other students. And I have remarkable students, just absolutely remarkable students. Students, for example, like Jerry Dempsey. By the way, most of my students have retired. I'm the only one still working. But students like Jerry Dempsey. Jerry had a remarkable career. He was CEO of Borg-Warner Chemical Waste Management, retired a couple of years ago as a CEO, as a chairperson of PPG, Pittsburgh Plate Glass. Jerry held down 2 full-time jobs, putting himself through our MBA program. And I take a look at those accomplishments, and of course, this makes me feel good. I'm also a realist to know that he would have done that without me. Or a student like Sam Turner, put himself through a very, very tough actuarial science program. Sam had a remarkable career. By the way, he put himself through school driving an 18-wheeler. Became the CEO, became the president of the Life Insurance Company of Virginia. E.R. Mitchell, an African-American student, finished his undergraduate degree at Georgia State, his MBA at Harvard. And if while you're here, if you ride MARTA, if you ride one of our subways here, chances are that station built by the E.R. Mitchell Construction Company. Well, once again, I'm not saying that, my teaching did this, but I can tell you right now, you build an organization, any organization where you want people to succeed, and it's going to make all of the difference in the world. Most of us work for organizations where people wish you well, but not too well. If you really want to provide leadership, if you want to build a winning culture, you build an organization where we celebrate the accomplishments of others so that what? So that everyone gets well together. Everyone gets well together. My only regret right now, well, I got several regrets right now. But at this particular point, you may very well be saying to yourself, well, even if I do agree with certain of your observations, which at best is unlikely, what really can I do to change things once I leave this room? Well, if this in effect is your feeling, and perhaps it is, I have what I consider to be an eminently practical suggestion. I'd like to recommend that you eliminate from your thought, from your thinking, from your philosophy, and particularly from your vocabulary, 2 words. Why me? Don't think it, don't say it. I wonder how many saw the George Burns, John Denver film. By the way, it's 25, 30 years old. How many of you saw Oh God? Well, if you didn't, get hold of it. Watch the last 10 minutes. I can tell you the last 10 minutes worth 20 times the time, your effort. It's a wonderful film. You recall the theme? Remember John Denver, an assistant supermarket manager, suddenly believes he has visits with God, played by George Burns. Well, John Denver goes home, tells his wife and his children. Could you imagine somebody telling you this? Do you know yesterday evening I spent a few hours with God? And what a delightful, what a wonderful, what a thrilling experience that was. And he said, oh, really? What did God look like? He said, well, he's about this big, wears a fishing cap and tennis shoes. He said, God smokes a cigar. They all said, right. He got fired. The final scene, and this is the one I commend to you, is a wonderful scene. John Denver, devastated emotionally, absolutely destroyed financially, is now driving out of town with God, with George Burns, and John Denver's automobile, and how well I recall that automobile. I actually owned one. It was an AMC Pacer. Now, even then, I felt there was a very special message. And I recall John Denver turning to God and asking, as incidentally each of us has asked, and if you haven't done it yet, let me assure you, you undoubtedly will. He turned to God and asked, dear God, of all the people in this world, of the millions and billions of human beings, dear God, why me? The answer? I can tell you from experience, it's always the same. Why not you? You want to make a difference? You want to build a winning culture? You want to be a decent human being? Simply stated, why not you? Well, now that you've gotten rid of why me, you see how easy that is? I'd like to now recommend that you develop the ability to listen with 3 ears, to listen with 3 ears. You know how unusual that is? Look around. And with ear number 1, I'd like to suggest that you listen. You listen to what the other person says. Of course, you may be saying at this particular juncture, why should I listen to what the other person says? After all, the other person rarely listens to me. And of course, you are precisely correct. When I conclude in just a few moments and someone asks you, how are you doing? Tell them the truth. Tell them poorly. Tell them in all likelihood you may not survive this occasion. Note the reaction. I'm glad to hear that. Ear number 1, don't say anything, just listen. Just listen to what the other person says. Now with ear number 2 has got to be a bit more finely attuned than ear number 1. I'd like to recommend that you listen to what the other person does not say, and of course what we don't say can be much more important than what we actually express. And then with ear number 3, this is the leadership ear. Let me tell you something, this is really the leadership ear. You want to be able to listen to what the other person wants to say, but simply does not know how to say it. And you tell me, who in here has not found herself or himself in a situation you want to say something, you want to talk, you want to express yourself, you don't know how. You just don't know how. You may even be afraid of an individual controlling a situation. You want to make a difference? You want to be a real leader? Establish a relationship, a connection, where other people will feel free to talk, to communicate, even if they don't know how. You know, my only regret now, and believe me, this is a legitimate regret. My only regret is the time limitation. But if you can give to people outside of this room what you've given to me here this morning, you can do anything you want. You might very well ask, well, what have we given to you? Well, number 1, you invited me here. Of course, you may be saying, look, not only did I not invite you here, but I'm very anxious to find out exactly who did. Nevertheless, you brought me here. Then having brought me here, you did something. Oh, you did something that's extremely important to me, and I want it's important as well to you. You listened. It's not really a case of agreement or disagreement, because that agreement or disagreement is of small consequence, as much as it is a matter of your telling me, by your presence, by your posture, and most especially by the attentiveness, listen, by the attentiveness that any human being can feel, that you care. Absolutely, you cannot give this. You cannot give any more than this to any other person. And I want to express to you and to Delta Sig, and Delta Sig is a terrific organization. It's meant a great deal to me all of my professional life. I want to express to you my thanks and my appreciation for your letting me be here with you this morning and for making the changes. And I certainly hope and trust that I'll have the opportunity to talk with all of you again collectively, and more important than collectively, much more important than collectively, individually. Thank you very much.
Dr. Dr. Mescon has time to take a few questions from the audience, so.
How about it? Any questions, comments, thoughts, observations, points of agreement or disagreement? How about it? This is like a mural out there. I know that. Okay. Well, once again, let me express to you my thanks, my appreciation. Terrific group. I want to wish each and every one of you all the very best.
As a token of our appreciation for Dr. Mescon, we have a certificate of appreciation and recognition to the contributions he's made to Delta Sigma Pi and to our leadership retreat this weekend. Thanks a lot, Dr. Mescon.
Mitch, let me just say this. While I appreciate this, I was hoping for money. This is a business fraternity, Mitch.
I'll have to meet with Bill and talk about that. We'll get lunch for you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.